2020, you made several recommendations to the government. Do you believe that the recommendations that you made are being followed by the government?
I do. They're not. Some of them have 12 months implementation time period, and my sense is they are on track to meet them.
Would the implementation of any of those recommendations prior to this point have prevented the breach that occurred?
We're going to be looking into that in our current investigation, so I can't speak on that.
Is it your view that privacy breaches should be immediately brought to the attention of Canadians?
Well, there are situations where you might need to keep something confidential because you want to address it, you want to contain it, you don't want the threat actors to have the information. So there is a balancing there, but certainly it's important that my office be made aware on a timely basis and that the discussion takes place about public communication to do that as soon as possible.
So in news reports on this matter, it says, and I quote, according to sources, the crisis prompted the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, to contact the Office of Revenue Minister Marie-Claude Bebeau. The agency prepared media lines to respond to inquiries should there be questions about the breach of H&R Block data and why the agency paid out millions to scammers. In the end, the public was never alerted to the scheme, end quote. So the scenario that you described, sir, was to help contain the threat, perhaps, and take action, inform your office immediately before then informing Canadians. This looks like a government not protecting Canadians, but protecting themselves from the criticism of Canadians who were the victims of potentially the government's negligence, likely the government's negligence. Do you believe that it's appropriate? No. Do you believe it's acceptable for the minister to have withheld this information from Canadians?
Well, I think that my office should have been notified earlier than it was, and I think it's beneficial for Canadians to have information as soon as possible. So there may be circumstances where it needs to be kept confidential longer, but I point to the 2020 situation where the Treasury Board had made a public announcement on this, and so Canadians were aware. And on the earlier situation.
Right. In this case, they didn't, and they literally just prepared a damage control plan and didn't inform Canadians whose personal information was being used for the ill-gotten financial gains of fraudsters and criminals. Isn't there an ethical, a moral obligation of the minister acting on behalf of the Crown to have informed Canadians?
Well, I think in terms of best practices, I would want to see notifications to my office, and I would want to see notifications.
And that didn't happen. So your office was not notified?
We were notified, but late. We were notified.
Quantify that.
Well, we were supposed to be notified 7 days after the department became aware, and we were notified in May 2024.
How many days later was that?
Some of those breaches dated back to 2020. So,
right.
So we're talking many days.
And continue with your answer.
And so in terms of public information, I think public information is important so that lessons can be drawn. There was a public announcement by the Treasury Board in 2020 in the GC Key matter. We investigated it. We issued our recommendation. And these are publicly available statements and conclusions that help the public debate and help conclusions being drawn. So, again, subject to some confidentiality provisions, which may be legitimate for a certain time, these matters should be made public.
And the Canadians that have been defrauded would rightly lose confidence in the institution of government generally, but also in this case, in the Canada Revenue Agency, which has extraordinary powers, extraordinary access, and is, it can be the vector by which individuals end up jailed, fined, their wages can be garnished, assessed massive penalties, and this organization, this minister, opted instead to lie by omission to Canadians. Canadians were expected to believe that everything was okay because we haven't been told any different? Does it cause irreparable harm to the institution of government when this information is concealed from Canadians?
Well, what we highlighted in our earlier report is that these breaches have impacts on Canadians, and they can cause stress. You highlight the garnishment. There can be situations where people have to take steps, very distressing steps. So as much as possible has to be done for Canadians in these circumstances to inform them, notify them, protect them, and to draw lessons from that.
In my remaining time, Chair, I want to give notice of a motion. Given that, at a time when Canadians are lining up at food banks in record numbers and facing the worst cost of living crisis in a generation, Justin Trudeau's Minister of Emergency Preparedness accepted 2 taxpayer-funded VIP suite tickets to attend a Taylor Swift concert in Vancouver. The committee call on the Minister of Emergency Preparedness and PAVCO Chair Gwendolyn Point to testify before the committee for no less than 2 hours separately, and order PAVCO to provide the names of all federal ministers, officials, or staff provided with tickets to any of the Taylor Swift concerts at BC Place and any related communications.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Barrett. The motion is on notice.